What's your public transport horror story? Back in San Francisco, I took the Muni home after a late shift. Due to the time, the compartment was only a third full. At one of the stops, only one woman gets on. Take a better look at her, she's dirty as hell. Like, you can see literal layers of dirt all over her jacket and jeans. Also, she seems extremely anxious. She's kind of hopping from one foot to the other and panic is written on her face. I figure she's simply homeless, which isn't uncommon in San Francisco. Everyone just kind of gets used to it. But then people started to migrate away from her. Subtly at first, a few people got up and shifted seats a little bit over. After a few minutes, everyone around her had moved towards the ends of the compartment. Then the woman started to get more anxious and moved to a seat closer to people. Those people all made a face and left their seats. Pretty soon, people were walking from that end of the compartment to mine. This caused the woman to panic and follow them. When she walked by me, I caught a huge whiff of her odor and it all made sense. The stench was unmistakable. The lady wasn't covered in dirt, it was human shit. Chaos ensued. Everyone in the compartment was running away from the woman and she was in full panic trying to be a part of the crowd. On a Muni train, that meant people were just running back and forth from one of the train to the other. I sunk into my seat and made myself as small as possible while this went down. The woman ran around as people were yelling and climbing over seats trying to get away. Every time the lady brushed up against someone, she left a full body smear of human shit on that person. I saw her tag a man in business suit, a lady in a nice dress, some high school kids, etc. At the next stop I shot out of that train like a ducking lightning bolt. I'd seen some crazy shit go down on Muni. That was the first time I'd seen it involve literal shit. Also, I think Carthage should be destroyed. Bard. Evening rush hour. Heat wave. Breakdown while halfway across the water. At least 8 bodies smooshed against mine. Everyone staring intently into their phones, trying to be somewhere else. Don't miss it at all. I hate that. Every time I'm commuting home, to work on Bard I pray we get out of the tunnel just fine without the duck and train breaking underwater lol. I was on vacation in England, on a train going to Dover from London. Everything was fine until we hear "you ducking twat" yelled by this 15-year-old kid. Naturally, everyone's ears perked up to hear what was going on. So then his mom stands up and starts yelling to the entire train, "You want to know what that was about?" I threw out his porn. Then she turns to the kid and was like, "Yeah, what are you going to masturbate to now?" I don't know if I'd call that a horror story, but it was funny, to say the least. Sounds like a normal English train to me. Dude just pulled down his pants and started pooping. Funnily enough, I was on the brown line. Baker line? Once, I was on a bus in San Francisco, and a woman sat next to me. I didn't think much of it and was just staring out the window when I smelled something unpleasant, and turned to identify it. The woman had pulled off her sneakers and sweaty socks and had propped her foot up against the back of the seat in front of us. She was clipping her toenails. People do this in London reasonably often. They also put nail polish on, which is pretty nasty to smell in an enclosed space for any amount of time. Do your nail maintenance at home, you inconsiderate ducks. I was around 16 and this guy, clearly insane, gets on the train and walks over to this woman maybe 18 years old and just stands over her heavily breathing. We were the only ones on the train before he got on and we both looked at each other and I nodded my head and raised my hand, letting a slight gesture that if he did something I'd intervene. He was wearing a white shirt with marker writing all over it. I couldn't read most of it, but I did manage to read "Government, keep your candid opinions to yourself." He sat down after a few stops and wouldn't stop looking at her. It clearly made her very uncomfortable. Then women got up and sat closer to me and we started chatting, reassuring if anything would have happened I would have helped. The out of nowhere the guy stands up and starts yelling at me for cock blocking him. I honestly thought he was going to attack me. He was easily over 200 pounds and I was just around 140. Then thankfully I managed to get him off the train with words. Once he got off we laughed and enjoyed the night ride home. Ducking TTC. So I have 2 stories, if it's okay. When I was 17 I was on the bus with my girlfriend and a pregnant lady entered screaming in pain while her husband was trying to calm her down. Everyone on the bus tried help somehow, but a few minutes later she gave birth to her baby. I mean, the baby dropped on the ground lifeless. And if this wasn't horrible enough, she, non-pregnant woman, fainted on the baby. Almost with all her body. I had massive nightmares for years because of that event. Second story, I was on the bus minding my business while the traffic light was red, and after some time the bus window glass shattered and blood everywhere. A lost bullet hit a girl in the head. This was on the same year. Welcome to Rio de Janeiro equals. Edit, typos. And autocorrect that failed on me. An old man sat next to me, smiled and said, "You got real pretty feet, are you married?" and tried to touch my hair. I got my license within a month, then a week later I bought a car. The kind-looking old man that told my nephew, who had to share my seat, to try sitting on his lap for a better ride. I've never felt as sick as I did in that minute. Oh man. I'm a peaceful person, but if someone said that to my nephew I'd kill them. I was on the subway in Seoul. A clown entered our car. The train started to leave the station, but stopped once it was in the tunnel. Some mumbled staticky Korean gibberish came over the loudspeaker. Someone had thrown themselves in front of the train. The clown looked at me. I looked at the clown. He decided at that point that it was his job to entertain our car, and I was his unwilling stooge. Sounds like a good comedy sketch. Our plane was having a huge delay in getting on the runway. We had been sitting motionless for over 2 hours. At this point, everyone on the plane is super agitated and cannot wait for the plane to start. When on the final inspection, the plane has technical difficulties that cause it to be delayed yet another hour. So most people turn on electronics, including myself, when a middle-aged man shrieks that electronics are dangerous and literally rages that everyone turn off their phones. He continues that we are setting a bad example for his children. But when his family calls in to ask why the plane hasn't departed yet, he obviously answers his phone. The plane was not even moving, nor was it even close to get on the runway. I would argue he is setting a bad example for his children. I got in a cab and the driver was smoking a joint. As we are driving up the street we pass a group for about 20 black guys in front of CVS, and the driver crawls so far out the window that his hip is on the top of the door frame and yells, "Get a job. Get off the corner." As he drives by at around 25 miles per hour and I'm trying to not be recognized. Holy shit. 20 guys? Your driver was dumb, but that's hella suspicious. Probably not what Op had in mind, but this happened to me back in December. I live in the US, and was sent to Germany for a work meeting. The trip there was 2 flights, Denver, Frankfurt then Frankfurt Stuttgart. Glancing at the booking my employer had made for me, my return trip was the same in reverse, Stuttgart, Frankfurt then Frankfurt, Denver. So, the morning of my flight I decide to splurge on a taxi from my hotel to the airport, despite the fact that the Stuttgart Central Rail Station is right next to my hotel. Traffic is bad and it takes 45 minutes to reach the airport. I arrive and check the boards for my flight, but don't see it listed. Confused, I go up to the ticket agent and double check. She looks at me, seemingly equally confused, then checked my booking and informs me that the first leg of my trip, Stuttgart, Frankfurt, is not a plane, but instead a train. A train leaving in 40 minutes, from Stuttgart Central Station. Right next to my hotel. 45 minutes away by cab. She quickly jots down instructions for how to get to the airport train station and which train to take. I sprint there, barely make the train to the central station, then sprint off and manage to get on my train to Frankfurt just as they're closing the doors. God, what a stressful trip. Edit? Oh, how could I forget? I then reached Frankfurt but got stuck for over an hour in customs because 2 of the 3 scheduled customs agents called out or something, so they only had 1 agent handling every single international passenger moving through the Frankfurt airport. I thought I was going to miss my flight and literally sprinted the full length of the Frankfurt airport to my gate, which was the very furthest in the terminal from the entrance. In my country, train doors are always open. So people lean out holding the bars and handles, sometimes due to the rush and sometimes just for the thrill. The train was passing through a slum where some kid threw a stone at the train which hit the commuter standing in front of me. Luckily the guy fell in the train, with blood all over his face. I kept on dreaming about the same incident over and over again, about a scenario of him falling out of the train, and woke up out of bed, for nearly a week after the incident. While riding a bus in Pisa, Italy, a guy got super close behind me and started trying to subtly rub his crotch on my hip and butt. Every time the bus swayed to the side, he would try to ensure his crotch was glued to my ass. Considering how overcrowded the bus was, I couldn't even find enough room to ducking move away, so that was super unpleasant. It was made worse by the fact that he said, "Grazie" to me once it was finally my stop and I was able to shove my way through people. So gross. Mascusi. A guy in a trench coat, sounds super cliché, was jerking off in a train in NYC. My colleague also saw a man in a trench coat flash his dick. She was horrified but said she pointed and laughed. I had a dude open his trench coat and wank directly in front of me on the subway, Toronto. I reported him. Taking the S-Bahn in Frankfurt, didn't feel like paying the fee, so I borrowed my host brother's transit card. Went fine until we were on the train and a conductor came into our car. Now let me paint a word picture for you. This conductor looked exactly like the stereotypical Helga von Hammerschlag German matron. Tall, blonde, shoulders like an ox and a face with no room for nonsense or mercy. So she advances toward us and asks for our ticket. Now I had only been in Germany for about a month at this point, so my Deutsch was shit. So I didn't understand her and just followed what my friend was doing. She took one look at my card, then turned her dreadful crusher puny head gaze toward me and started directing me in rapid German. I had no idea what she was saying, but my friend was able to whisper that I needed to sign the back of the card before I could be used. So here I was, 17-year-old kid from Bumbleduck, Wisconsin, forging a signature in a foreign country beneath the eyes of an official who looked like she cracked nuts with her earlobes. After I was done, she took the card from me and examined it for the longest 5 seconds of my life. At this point I was sure I was about to be deported. I know, ridiculous, but she just handed it back to me with a frown and moved on. My heart was hammering the whole time, but afterwards I was so proud of this subterfuge that I convinced myself I was a con man of the caliber of Frank Abagnale. A super fat man was riding a Greyhound next to me and kept falling over in his seat onto me all night long. I would literally jam my iPod into his side, the old school iPod minis, the long thin kinds, and he would sorta wake up, right himself, and then go back to sleep and start falling over onto me again. I was genuinely afraid of being crushed. In 2009, I was 18 months out of college in the worst job market in recent history, and had moved to my parents' place on the South Shore of Staten Island while working an hourly job at a music distributor, hoping to have it turn permanent. For those who don't know, Staten Island is not well connected to the rest of NYC by subway, and the main ways to get to Manhattan are via ferry, which was really far, or by express bus, which cost more but was quicker and more convenient for my location, albeit subject to traffic, despite the bus lanes. Usually about once every 2 weeks, I'd get caught in some traffic that would lead me to arrive late. My boss was pretty chill, and never gave me shit for it. I usually tried to get in between 8:30 and 9 a.m., which meant leaving the house around 7:15 a.m. On this fateful morning, feeling sick and groggy, I dragged myself onto the bus as usual, and at the entrance to the Battery Tunnel, to Manhattan, traffic had come to a complete, catastrophic standstill. I texted my boss, and rather than the usual "no problem," I was met with "when do you think you'll be in?" Odd. I told him that there was a major accident, we hadn't moved in a half an hour, and I truly had no idea. We sat there. And sat, and Saturday, in catastrophic gridlock, no movement, nowhere to go, for 2 hours. I eventually strolled into the office a little after 11 a.m., after spending over 3.5 hours getting there. I lamented my plight with my boss while grabbing a cup of coffee, and was asked to join him in a conference room. In that room was an HR person. My promotion. Health insurance. Paid vacation. Wrong. I was being let go, as was 40% of the company that day. The hourly workers had, in fact, been slated to be let go first so as to get the quick ones out of the way, so my unscheduled delay had inadvertently pushed back their entire schedule for the day. I was asked to gather my things and leave quickly and quietly, and after a quick breakfast at the diner, I was back on that ducking bus back home again. And that's why I have a fear of long commutes to this day. TLDR, epic traffic jam on way to work, only to get laid off as soon as I walked through the door. I hate buses and long commutes. In 1995 an engine blew out on an airplane I was on, heading from Virginia to Chicago, Illinois. Shit, did everyone get out alright? Riding TriMet and a couple of drunk junkies sit next to me. The lady starts playing with my hair, grabbing at my dick and ass, rubbing my chest, saying how cute I was. Her guy friend, maybe husband? Loudly told me he loves to watch people duck his wife and I can duck her for $20 but I gotta pay for the hotel room, then starts showing me the heroin in his jacket pocket and was like, "We're ready to party if you are," loudly. Very loudly. I stood up and they just followed me with her grabbing at my balls and him grabbing at his own. Duck TriMet. Riding a bus in a rough section of Queens. Two toddlers start fighting, their mothers put them in the aisle of the moving bus so they had more room, then started taking bets from other riders on who was gonna win. That's like a Tracy Jordan story. Boarded a train. I don't know what happened in there, but there was puke everywhere throughout the whole wagon. The smell was one of the worst things I ever smelled. You know that smell? That smelly smell that smells smelly. Dude reached into his bag, pulled up an onion, and started munching away as one would an apple. Truly horrifying. Ugh, my honeymoon. We decided to get a private room on Amtrak and ride it from FL up to NYC, where we would get on a second train that would take us to upstate NY and from there rent a car to Maine. We decided train because, hey, train ride across the East Coast, private room, romantic, right? So we Ubered to the little train station. Train was 8 hours late. Yes, 8. Train finally arrived, and we made it to NYC. There was no connecting train. Amtrak just gave us some money and told us to go get on a bus that was going to leave in 20 minutes. Bus station was like $10 away. So we have all our luggage piled up and we are trying to get through the massive crowds of NYC to the dang bus station. BTW, this was my first experience with NYC. Never again. Miss the bus. Wait a few hours for the next bus. We cram into a totally packed bus with what seemed to be the skeeziest of NYC people. Rode to another bus station. I do not recall where it was, but it was the nastiest junkie-filled bus station I had ever seen. Looked like something out of the 1970s. All the bathrooms were covered in shit and piss. Rode the second bus through the night with what I swear was a load of bums the other city was trying to deport. Eventually got where we were going a day and a half late. Missed out on our Finger Lakes tour. Never again, Amtrak. Thanks for listening to another episode of Reddit X. Subscribe and activate the notification bell so you won't miss any stories. Feel free to share your own stories below in the comments. Have a good day.